Welcome to the Crypto Teacher, and guys, I come with that video just to make you think, and I'm coming with this one early. Now, is sports rigged? It is definitely rigged, guys, especially if you read my book. If you have the NWO book, you know for a fact it's rigged. But is there anything wrong with rigging sports? No, it's just entertainment. Now, for those who are distracted by it and put emotional value into it, yes, they may have a problem with it. But as a kid, I always knew it was rigged. Always. Me and my cousin used to argue all the time. He was about 13, 14 years older than me. Always argued. I know it was rigged from the beginning. But the fact is that as a kid, I watched wrestling. Love wrestling. Watched sports. I played plenty of sports. But the fact is that as you become an adult, it's things that are more important. And the fact is, by you saying that that's my team, or like you own the team, like you're getting paid from the team and all this emotional value into it, you're distracted from things that really matter, like the Federal Reserve. You're not worried about that. That's your money. But the fact is, guys, we have blockchain now here and virtual reality. So is this going to help the rigging? Most likely, because the fact is that it's going to take away reality. And the media does not do any more investigative reporting. And then also, guys, don't forget that the NBA, NFL, all the sport leagues have a security force inside. So these are CIA, DEA, FBI members. Their own security force. Enjoy the rest of the video.
Imagine what would have happened if before Michael Jordan debuted in the NBA, you had invested in a percentage of his future salary or sponsorship. Now you would be a millionaire. In Globa Talent, we have put forth this wonderful idea into practice, and we offer you a platform to invest in athletes or sports clubs that need financing. In exchange, you will get a percentage on their prizes, sponsorship, or any other right that the athlete or club is willing to offer for your investment.
Industry.
Blockchain technology in the sport industry will change radically the way how the sports industry works today. What we're planning to do with blockchain is in the same way that Satoshi Nakamoto envisioned it for Bitcoin, or other people following him later, as Ethereum have been trying to do, is in decentralizing the economy. So we're planning to decentralize the sports industry, because the sports industry is a very centralized economy. You have all kind of agents, middlemen, and all kind of other intermediary hedge funds and financial institutions taking big chunks of the pieces from athletes. And what we think is that we need to connect athletes and fans and create direct relationships between them without intermediaries.
Go ahead.
What I was just going to say quick is, you think about it, ESPN funds the NFL. ESPN funds Major League Baseball. They fund the NBA. They're not really broadcast partners. They're literally funding these leagues to exist. And now, like you say, now they're getting into the gambling bend of the business. So, I mean, there is a very real thing where ESPN does not want to out criminal behavior. They don't want to out, questionable integrity from these leagues, because they are funding them. When you give them billions of dollars a year, you're not going to look for the dirt on these leagues unless you absolutely have to. And that's the problem, is if law enforcement doesn't out these things, and law enforcement, like in terms of game fixing, I know the FBI doesn't investigate for game fixing anymore. They quit. They quit in the 1980s because they couldn't get convictions, because they were forced to look into the war on drugs. They basically said, if something falls into our lap, we'll look at it. Otherwise, we're not actively pursuing this anymore. So that leaves it up to the media. And again, if the media is funding these leagues, are they really going to dig up the dirt on them? And that's the problem. If the media isn't, force feeding this onto fans and say, hey, look at this. Look.
Over a 100-year period that they would actually design, implement, and bring in. And H.G. Wells talked about it too. He talked about arenas. He says arenas could be put up across the world for sports, for instance. Now, at that time, sports was something that children, school children were into. Adults became adults and got onto adult things. So it was unimaginable at the time that people could actually believe that there was even a need for adult sports and entertainment, never mind having arenas built across the world. But he said we can do this, and foist basically a sports culture for the males. Using a tribal system, We're all tribal to an extent. That's why we even bother to vote for a tribal leader. This is well understood. That's why we're supplied with these leaders. And because the average man was to become more disengaged from his own destiny as the expert class arose, it was decided that the males would get their outlet, basically, gradually becoming helpless as males through sports. Therefore, they'd have a tribal team they could identify with. They could cheer them on as they were winning. In their own personal lives, they were getting nowhere. They were getting disenfranchised, in a sense, as experts took over decision-making for them in all kinds of fields. So this was psychology at use, planned before they even implemented the sports. When radio came along, of course, they used that to the maximum. Sports for the men, soaps basically for the women, and then in came television, as I say, with its alpha state, its hypnotic state. And sure enough, around the 1960s, really, 50s and 60s, it took off. It really, really took off. And men became glued on Saturday nights to the sports shows. A culture industry, which is called by its own the culture industry. The Soviet Union had a department called the culture industry. Their actors and directors were called the cultural leaders, because they would, like a computer, people are like computers, all you have to do is keep giving them new updates every so often, and you can change an entire country or a nation or a block of nations who are all getting the same upgrades at the same time along certain paths.
What are you hearing from the powers that be? Anything?
They just want me to go away right now.
We've spoken to them, and they don't want to talk about it either. They have nothing to say.
But they're not denying anything, and they're not refuting any of the facts.
Let me talk about some of the major charges. And I just jotted down a few of the. I mean, you're saying, for example, virtually every team owner gambles on football teams.
Well, I'm saying that no fewer than 26.
That's
NFL team owners have documented ties. Past and present NFL team owners have documented business ties to either the gambling community and or the organized crime syndicate. I'm also saying that no fewer than 70 NFL games have been fixed.
Now that's pretty rough stuff. You're saying no fewer than 70 NFL games have been fixed. You mean the outcome, the point spread, what?
I'm saying the points were shaved and thereby fixed. Yeah.
How does this happen?
Well, I first got into this about 1983. Vincent Persani, who is the head of the Michigan State Attorney General's Office Organized Crime Division, told me, if you're going to do a book about the NFL, Dan, you're going to have to get into this guy, Don Dawson, because he was fixing games. We knew it. I went to my friends and my sources at the Internal Revenue Service, the Organized Crime Intelligence Division. They said Don Dawson was fixing games. I went to the FBI, the Organized Crime and Racketeering Section of the Justice Department, and Strike Force field offices. Everybody told me what Don Dawson was fixing games. At that point, I had enough evidence to print that allegedly Don Dawson was fixing NFL games. He was a major bookmaker in the Midwest. I then went to Dawson, I tracked him down, I jumped through all kinds of hoops to interview him, and when I interviewed him on about the 7th or 8th interview, he admitted to me that he had personally participated in the fixing of no fewer than 32 NFL games.
How does that happen?
He liked to work with the quarterback. He would go to the quarterback would come to him and say, I need some bread. What's the line on the game this week? And the bookmaker would say, you guys are favored by 6 points. And then the reply was, we're not going to cover the spread. And basically that was it.
Now, do you name players?
Oh, sure, I name players. And also in 1979, I go into the specifics of 8 fixed games that were allegedly fixed by 2 referees who were investigated by both the FBI and the IRS. And I list the 8 games on page 308 of the book.
Yeah. Are drugs involved in this at all?
Yeah, drugs are the real variable in all of this. I mean, when a drug dealer has a relationship with a player, there's an extortionate edge to that situation whereby that dealer has that player's career in his hands because of the drug policies within the NFL for throwing a person out. Within the past few years, no fewer than 9 NFL teams have been investigated because their players were receiving drugs from gamblers. Now, I know gamblers who, on principle, refuse to sell drugs, but I'm not aware of many drug dealers who on principle refuse to gamble. And the key here is that the NFL is very aware of the fact, and their worst case scenario is the player who's strung out can't pay his bill to his dealer, and so he you know, the dealer comes to him and says, hey, you owe me money, and the dealer says, and the player says, I told you I can't pay it, and the dealer says, that's okay, but now you're going to come and work for me.
Now, the obvious question, you're talking about all these games being fixed, you're talking about all these people involved, you're talking about going to various agencies, and they're saying who the people are involved. Why has this gone uncovered if this is the case?
What I'm also alleging in the book is that no fewer than 50 legitimate investigations of corruption within the NFL have been either suppressed or just flat out killed as a result of a sweetheart relationship between NFL security, which is the internal police force within the league, and a variety of federal and state and local law enforcement agencies. I'm a big baseball fan, and I have more respect for baseball right now because of the way it's handled the Pete Rose case in the open and honest manner that it's handled this case than I've ever had before. I have more confidence in baseball because it's handled.
Well, how do these investigations get quashed?
Basically, the NFL security people, who are all former Justice Department people, will go to their colleagues, their old colleagues in the Justice Department or in these various law enforcement agencies, and they'll say, we can handle this internally. Let us handle it internally so that we're not getting all the publicity that we would be getting. And so to all intents and purposes, these investigations I can cite chapter and verse. Again, I cite about 50 in the book.
It is a strange sport because it is the one sport where you can go to a game and come away, even if your home team has won, disappointed because you're not as much interested in the outcome as the post.
Yeah, it's a situation where you have a game where the score is 21-20, there's 30 seconds left on the clock, the home team, you're up in the stands, and the home team has the ball on the 30-yard line. Now, the problem is that the home team had to give 3 points in the game. Now, the quarterback goes down on one knee, and the people in the stands boo. Now, they're starting to legalize gambling in Oregon. They're going to have a sports lottery, NFL lottery in Oregon, Kentucky. I mean, the state isn't in the bookmaking business for eleemosynary or philanthropic purposes. Yeah. They're going to be in this to make money. They're going to take a 40 to 60% skim of the handle, of the total pool of bets. And in the end, they're going to educate the public as to how to gamble, how to use the point spread. And then the public is going to realize that it can get a bigger bang for its buck from Charlie the bookie, the friendly local bookmaker at the corner bar, who's going to be put up $11 to win 10, and taking a 10% vigorish or commission on the losing bets he books.
Now, is all this, is what you have written here going to get things unearthed?
Well, I'm hoping that there'll be a federal investigation, hopefully the Senate Select Committee, to investigate organized crime's influence in all of professional sports, not just football, but on baseball and basketball as well. I'm hoping that there will be registration and licensing of anyone with a financial interest in a professional sports team, that there will be public disclosure of financial transactions involving professional sports teams, that there will be a further examination of public ownership of teams so that the citizens of the cities in which these teams play, the public can have literally a piece of stock in those companies. I'm also afraid that the illegal gambling economy has become an adjunct to the First Amendment because of the insistence by the sports media to print and broadcast the betting line and to hire odds makers and handicappers for the purposes of...
That is true. You read the newspaper and the point spread is in there, and it's obviously in there to give you information for gambling, which is
gambling is still illegal in 49 states until September 6th when the lottery is legalized in Oregon.
Yeah.
I got into this basically as a disgruntled fan, for lack of a better term. I realized that the sporting leagues, be it the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, take your pick, they have the ability, and you can even see it, to control everything that surrounds the games. You know, and it's made me wonder, well, if they could control everything around the games because they're really a partner with the broadcast media that covers the games, then who's stopping them from controlling the games themselves? And as I started to research that idea and look into it, I came to realize that there's really nothing that prevents the leagues from doing exactly that, from controlling the game, because the product that they sell to the consumer, and you got to remember, this is a business, the product is the game. And they have the very ability legally to manipulate, control, fix, whatever term you want to use, their own product of the game to get the desired outcome they want, to make it more entertaining for the fans who are consuming it both in the stadium and at home. And so once I came upon that and realized there's no law that stops them from doing this, well, then I felt, you know, the floodgates were open and they probably were doing this. And the more and more I looked into it, and every fan I'm sure who's watched a game has seen something that's unusual that's happened, I came to realize they are doing this and they're getting away with it, and no one out there is calling their bluff.
And also, there's a lot of stuff in sports, if you look at maybe a little bit more into the numerological side of things. I know that if you go to Kobe Bryant's 666th game, he scored 81 points. And if you get in numerology and the occult, 81 is a very significant number, as well as 666. And man, there's a lot of just things that make you go, wow, how did that happen? And
well, the biggest fact, like I say, like I just pointed out, is that there's no law that prevents this from occurring. I mean, there's two laws that come close. There's the Sports Bribery Act in 1964, but that really only covers bribing someone, a player, a coach, a referee, to alter the outcome of a game, not necessarily just having an employee, such as a referee or even a player, do the league's bidding. That's not bribery. That's just paying somebody to do their job. So that doesn't really cover the idea of fixing your own games. And the other law is the quiz show law that passed in the 1950s to stop the quiz shows from being fixed, because a lot of people don't remember the television networks back in the 50s were actually rigging their own game shows for the exact reason I say sports are rigging their own games, to make them more entertaining. And that actually got busted because a whistleblower and Congress investigated it. They passed a law and they stopped television from fixing any intellectual contests. But that doesn't cover sports, which is a physical contest. So there's no law that prevents this from happening. I don't think it's that blatant. I mean, I don't think they do conspire before the beginning of a season and say, look, we're going to have, like last year, the Denver Broncos win the Super Bowl. I don't think they really plotted that out from the get-go to have that happen. I think what happens more often than not is a league will recognize a storyline that has emerged, or they'll recognize a player that has emerged into the forefront of, the fans' minds, and decide to push that agenda further than it perhaps naturally should occur. So I think in the case like with the Broncos last year, they realized Peyton Manning's retiring. A lot of people are thinking, well, can he or can't he do it? And then they kind of started pushing that agenda. And you can notice it. I mean, you could see it in the pregame shows. They start talking more and more about the Broncos and Peyton Manning. You hear more sports radio talking about Broncos and Peyton Manning, even outside of Denver. And the more and more of this agenda gets pushed, it seems like the more and more of those teams succeed when that agenda is being pushed. And so, like I say, I don't think it's a vast conspiracy that says we're going to script out every game. I don't think it's professional wrestling. But I think when they see profit attached to a certain team or player succeeding, then that's when they kind of put all the gears in motion and tell the referees to give that team more of a break, to call tougher fouls on their opponents and that sort of thing. And that creates victories and losses and ultimately championships for what the league wants to occur.
So the referees, I mean, are they told by the people that own the teams, or who tells the referees to lay off on that call and to look for something from the other guys to cause a foul?
Well, I think, if you listen to Tim Donaghy, who was a former NBA referee for like 10, 12, 13 years, something like that, he got busted by the FBI for betting on basketball, and he got kicked out of the NBA. But once he did leave the league, he basically turned to a whistleblower and said, look, the NBA is manipulating these games. They're controlling your outcomes. And the way they do it is partially through us referees, but they're not blatant about it. They don't say, hey, we need LeBron James to win the championship. They don't say that. What they do is, through their memos and through their review processes and that sort of thing, they basically imply this is what we need to happen. They say, call tighter fouls on this, look for this on the other team, because they do this a lot, and it is a foul, call that. They kind of just put it in their minds, and the referees aren't dumb. They realize that a 4-game series doesn't make as much money for the league as a 7-game series would in the playoffs. So the referees kind of know what needs to be done. They realize this is entertainment, that this is show business, and then with that little push from the league that says do this or don't do that, they get the message and they go out and perform as they need it. And that's the exact thing. I mean, that's why it's not a violation of like the Sports Bribery Act that relates to bribing a referee to alter the outcome of a game. The NBA officials, the NFL referees, they're employed by the league. It's not bribery when the people who are paying you tell you to do your job one way as opposed to another way, especially, again, when there's no law being broken by, really helping out one team or one player succeed over and above what they naturally should.